Is Unicorn Wars the goriest movie ever created? If you've always fantasized about bears who engage in combat with unicorns, then this film is surely the one you've been eagerly anticipating. Unicorn Wars presents its narrative in a similar vein as the popular animated series Happy Tree Friends, but with a more profound message and numerous allusions to the Bible. This film revolves around endearing creatures who are relentless in their mission to eradicate all unicorns and restore God's paradise. Alberto Velázquez, the mastermind behind Psychonautas, brings this creatively crafted play to life, delving into the tale of two brothers and their tragic descent into madness. Join us as we closely examine each character and unravel the choices that have led them to this point of utter destruction, leaving behind an ending that is both enigmatic and unsettling. The tale of these bears commences in the Heart mainstay, revealing that they have recently joined the armed forces. They proudly serve their nation. Something that does not happen very often in other animations. But what caught my attention is their leader Sergeant Carichias, who is always exploiting his team to the max, telling them that he wouldn't last in the magic forest. And boy was he right. What a shame. During the night, the bears were preparing to sleep, and we can see that the creators didn't care much about censorship. They literally throw the teddy bears lollipops in our faces. Then we meet the rest of the characters, among them Azulin and Gordy, as well as the Mimosin twins, who by the way seem to have a very shady relationship. Is it possible that these bears are related to each other because they come from the northern region? They then inform us that appearing cute and cuddly is a crucial requirement in bear society. It is what gives them their worth. And Azulin, the most kawaii and narcissistic bear. He considered himself the most beautiful, and besides, he keeps humiliating his brother Gordy, a pink bear with low self-esteem, since he was too chubby. And for that, Azulin made him feel like an ugly, inept man.
Mírate, no eres nada bello.
Pobre cosita fea.
However, he tells him it's just anxiety he's had since his mommy died.
Avergüenzas.
But then, a little bear named Achuchones couldn't stand to see Gordy being mistreated, shouting at Azulin, who knew he was covering his wrinkles.
Son feas.
This made the little bear explode with rage and hit Achuchones, letting us see how aggressive he could be. This made Coco, one of my favorite characters by the way, run to separate them, having to hit Azulin, and of course, he didn't take it very well.
Tienen consecuencias.
Azulin left in tears, and outside he met the father of the town, who by the way is quite nosy. He tells him that it's okay to cry, after all they are in a war, and to comfort him, he gives him his cuddly Bible. At night we see Azulin sleeping next to his brother Gordy, and Azulin began to read the prophecy of the Bible, where we are told that the bear that kills the last unicorn will become a perfect and beautiful being. And Azulin obviously wanted to be that bear. Everything seemed to be going well during the night, but then Gordy woke up his brother because he had wet the bed, so Azulin told him to change the sheets so no one would notice.
Sweetheart, cuddly for you.
But this little devil betrayed him, humiliating him in front of everyone.
From now on, we'll call him Pissy.
You bastard! Leaving us to see how Azulin enjoyed watching his poor brother Gordy suffer, although the truth is that he was the one who had peed himself. The next day we see that Azulin was trying too hard to be the best of all. However, the problem is that Coco was better than him, which generated a great resentment and envy towards his partner.
I hate him.
Besides, the sergeant's attitude didn't help much to say the least.
The second is always the first of the losers.
And to make matters worse, Coco was appointed chief of recruits, a position Azulin dreamed of. And then we see some of his childhood memories, where his father revealed to him that his wife was going to leave him since she was cheating on him. Azulin's father had a very ugly inferiority complex, since he told his son that he should not be like him, because he feared that he would end up being someone like him, or at least that is how he described himself. Never be mediocre like your father. This affected Azulin, who believed that the only way to be loved was to be the best of all, and that is why he detested Coco so much, for, according to him, stealing his place. We are also shown the bears as very religious beings, and something that caught my attention is that their religion basically consists of killing unicorns, and literally their chorus goes something like this.
Good unicorn, dead unicorn.
Good unicorn, dead unicorn. Now that's disturbing, all to encourage them to take back their lands from where the unicorns had banished them long ago. Sometime later we see the High Command criticizing Azulin's group without any reason.
Sergeant, you're the worst company I've seen in a long time.
So one day they spoke to the sergeant to give them a mission. They were to go to the magic forest and find a group that did not return. But Sergeant Caricia knew it was a lousy idea since most were rookies. But well, I imagine the higher-ups thought something like, we don't care about their lives, go see what happens and see if they come back. By the way, something that caught my attention is the cute names of everyone. Sergeant Caricius, Colonel Flappy, what's next? Corporal Pompon.
Send him in, Corporal Pom-Pom.
Yes, they had a good time with those names. Anyway, the next day they all got ready for their death trip. And here we see Metisha's father again, who took the opportunity to present them with cuddly hearts. And here they would be something like a rosary. But something curious is that Sergeant Caresses seems to be a non-believer because he instantly rejects the mimosa necklace. We also see Gordy being turned away, as no one wants him to go. He will delay us. But to our surprise, Azulin defended his brother. This is suspicious, since it is partly his fault that he is treated like this. Even, the sergeant just sees him as a burden.
We need a dumb beast to load and carry the heavy materials for us.
Later, we see everyone say goodbye to their families, learning that Coco has a wife and is expecting a baby, and that most of them seem to have children, while Azulin and Gordy say goodbye to their father, who gives them a pie or a cake, I don't know, giving most of it to Azulin, a fact that will be important for later on. And after the hypocritical speech of the military, the group travels into the magic forest, which does not look as scary as they said. At dusk, already well exhausted, they stop to eat the same horrible food from the camp. Yes, worse than prisoners. And the only one who would eat anything was Gordy. Oh yeah. Hey, are you going to finish your little horn?
Cómetelo, Gordis.
However, we see that Azulin preferred to eat his father's cake on the sly, just to avoid sharing it with his friends, showing us his great selfishness. On the other hand, Gordy had separated to go to the bathroom, but then Achuchonis took off his boots and said something that got us off.
Hey, don't look at my pee-pee. What? Don't look at my pee-pee. What?
Chubby jokes with Gordy that he knew I was spying on him.
Does he like to watch? No, but no.
When out of nowhere a lizard fish appeared and bit him. And Gordy, who is a godspread, began to cure him. But then the little bear revealed his true intentions.
Gordy. I say if you want, you can see my dick.
But what? Let's see one more time, please.
I say, if you want, you can see my dick.
¡Es enorme! Se intenta cogerme.
To be honest, at first I thought it was just a joke, but then, when I read the comics, I realized that this does have a story. Well, in this version, Chuchones is immediately taken to the hospital, and Gordy goes to visit him. And when they were eating his cake, Chuchones said something very funny.
Gordy, let me give you a kiss. If you don't like it, you can walk away at any time.
Although in the movie, Gordy runs away with the trauma of his life. But anyway, by the way guys, you would support me quite a bit by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Anyway, the next day, they continued on their journey. But then, Chuchones started screaming from the pain. The lizard was very venomous, and one thing you can see is that neither the sergeant nor the soldiers were prepared for something like that, because all they did was to start singing, literally. If it doesn't heal today, will it heal tomorrow? What nonsense. But hey, in the meantime, Gordy came across a little creature and didn't hesitate for a second to give him cake. Not like his selfish brother.
That's a real man.
And Azulin, who was procrastinating like a slacker, found some strange rainbow-colored caterpillars, something that made everyone very happy. But then came the little father to ruin the party, telling them that they should throw them away because that was of the devil, because here the caterpillars represent what is known as unlegal substances. No, that is a sin. This made Sergeant Caricia go crazy, threatening the little father, claiming that it didn't matter, since they didn't know if they were going to survive. But the indignant father just walked out of there. Where is his god now? So the night came and they were already tasting the poor caterpillars. Some of them, by the way, had a face full of horror, but this did not matter to them, and they began to take out the stuffing. The caterpillars caused them strong hallucinations and made them very stupid.
Holy shit, now we'll see what happened.
It even gave some horrible nightmares.
Somebody help me!
And this is when the father says one of his epic lines.
Forgive them, Lord, do not know what they are doing.
On the other hand, we see a brother Mimosin, already very disturbed with his caterpillar, believing that this one was telling him to go alone to the forest. And since we see this macabre face, he did not give very good confidence. But his brother saw this and tried to stop him. However, out of nowhere a giant caterpillar appeared wanting to devour him, so he pounced on the beast to kill it. But what he and we knew was that the thing was actually his little sister.
It is not true. Tell them it's not true!
So the next day they began to search for them relentlessly, until Gordy came across one of them, stiff as a board.
Her guts are all over the place. She's cut up all over the place.
And what happened to the other cuddly brother, you may ask? Well, it turns out that they found him well hung, because when he realized what he had done, he could not bear the guilt and pain. As remember that both were very close. Too close, in fact. And then the father appeared to scold the sergeant, telling him that it was all his fault and that it happened for disobeying God. And we are quite surprised by the change in the sergeant, because at the beginning he seemed to be a pretty tough guy. Although, well, surely no one believed that something like that could happen. The next day they buried the bodies of the mimosos, and the little father took the opportunity to show off with his speech.
But what is death if we don't know what life is?
Yes, the little father is a real crack. And by the way, in your country, is it normal to do the same as the Mimosin? Leave your answer in the comments. Afterwards, everyone continued their search for the other group. And when they finally arrived, they were scared shitless. For they had all been torn apart by the unicorns. Or, well, that's what they let us imagine. Everyone was horrified by what had happened. And we see how the sergeant collapses again in front of everyone.
We're going to die. We're all going to die.
And let's remember that nobody was prepared for this, and the sergeant knew it.
These soldiers are screwed! Mírelos!
No man, what a leader. It makes me sick just to look at him. Although you have to understand that the sergeant was just training the recruits, and that no one had actually been in the woods before. But it didn't end there. Soon after, Achuchuni's foot became horribly infected, and they had no choice but to remove it.
Oh, Coco, please relieve my suffering.
At nightfall, we see everyone burning the bodies of their other team, and Achuchones, although he was one-armed, was already better. The next day we finally see a unicorn, a little baby named Maria, who by the way can communicate with animals.
Have you seen my mom today?
She was playing with her best friend when suddenly they ran into the herd, who by the way are all females anyway. They tell her to go with them, but Maria didn't want to because she was looking for her mother. And later in front of the lake we see that she has a kind of magical connection with her mother, but she only spoke to her to say goodbye and tell her that now she had to protect herself alone. But Maria did not understand anything.
Don't leave me!
Then we see Maria's mother wandering through the forest, and using her magic she began to regenerate nature, when suddenly the bears appeared and attacked her with their arrows without even letting her speak. The unicorn tried to defend itself, but the teddy bears eventually ended up killing her. And then the weirdo of the group said something like this:
Let's drink its blood!
However, when the unicorn dies, it releases a big flash of light, alerting the rest of the unicorns. The little bears were terrified, for they knew they were going to be worth chetos.
Oh Lord, protect us in your watering place!
Even so, the bears began to attack them, which did not help much because the unicorns began to kill most of them, including poor Achuchones. And to tell the truth, for being so cute, they knew how to represent the horror on their faces very well. The funny thing here is that Azulin saved his brother.
Behind you, asshole!
And just when it seemed that they were all going to die, the father appeared with a mimosa grenade, saying another of his epic phrases.
Sed fuertes, hijos míos.
And a curious thing about this is that the father was one of the few bears who admired Azulin. However, I still wonder why he didn't throw the grenade instead of sacrificing himself. And well, you have to remember that after all, the father wasn't a soldier, and he barely knew how they worked.
God, the damn gunpowder, there's no mastering it.
And by the way, for you, who is the favorite character? Anyway, I'm sure the community and the fandom love and respect the little father very much.
Father looks very rich with those glasses. You look like my caliph. All of us little bears have a great past, my son.
God, why did you abandon us and leave us surrounded by TikTokers? Why? Azulin and the rest ran to protect themselves from the smoke. However, Coco started to feel very bad, as a unicorn had slightly hurt him. And Azulin took advantage of this, supposedly to help him. But then he said something to him that we remembered at the beginning.
Your actions have consequences.
And in cold blood he took him out with his gun.
No! No!
But if you thought it couldn't get any worse, let me tell you that you're wrong. For this little devil began to eat Coco's flesh. This made Gordy's admiration for him instantly vanish, and he decided to go off on his own. Leave an F in the chat for this bear, guys, since he will never get to meet the baby bear he was waiting for in town. Anyway, days went by and we see that Gordy was doing pretty good at surviving in the woods. Wow, and everyone used to label him as inept. But after a while, he realized that Azulin was following him, for he was afraid to be alone. But Gordy yelled at him to get out.
Go away, I don't want to see you anymore, I hate you.
However, Azulin told him that he was very hungry, because of course eating Coco because of the envy he had for her was not enough, and Gordy, being the bread of God that he is, gave him the frog he had worked so hard to get. In spite of this, Azulin called Gordy's Meoncitos, but then they were in a big fight where Gordy won easily, making it clear that he is no longer that bear with low esteem of before. And something that caught my attention was that Azulin wanted to manipulate Gordy by calling him a manipulator.
You're a manipulator, you always have been.
Then they show us a flashback of both of them when they were still in the womb. Gordy was the first one to come out, and that's where his fear of being alone comes from. Also letting us see that Azulin was very envious of Gordy, because they believed that his mother preferred him just because he was born first.
I was always the second.
And his father's attitude didn't help much either, because thanks to him, he believed that the only way to be loved was to be the best at everything. And at nightfall, Azulin had a very strange dream, in which he ran after his mother's hat, until he reached his childhood room. And outside there was Gordy with his mommy. And the funny thing is that we see how Azulin treated them very badly since he was a child.
Only in spring, mommy. Don't touch me.
Well, he had a great resentment for his father's infidelity.
Azulin, you should know that your dad left home. Huh? Why? It was my fault, wasn't it? Yes, more or less.
And Azulin, who felt hurt, decided to do the most normal thing in the world. Yes, that's right, poison her.
What? What the fuck?
And we can understand the discomfort that her parents generated in her, but to kill her, that was already too much. And the mother, before dying, made Gordy promise to take care of his brother Azulin. She knew he was crazy.
You're sick, Mama said so.
Anyway, although we see Azulin full of guilt, I think it was only superficial. The next day, Gordy came across a river, which led them to some huge blueberry plants. And Gordy, being the bread of God that he is, forgave his brother instantly.
Vamos, ven, puedes acercarte.
And you have to remember that the food in camp sucked, and blueberries were his favorite food, just like in the short film, only here they savor it in a different way.
Where are the unicorns? I need to drink their delicious blueberry-flavored blood.
Both had had enough and fell fast asleep, but then Azulin saw Maria and her best friend, the unicorns from earlier, in the distance. But Azulin, although full of rage, knew he couldn't win, but he still took his arrow and attacked Maria in cold blood, all while Gordy watched in terror. But before he could take her down, Maria's friend attacked him and threw him off the cliff. Yeah, score 1 for the unicorn. Gordy was devastated. Even after everything his brother had done, he was very worried about him.
Oh no! Azulin, Dios mío!
But the effort to find him was in vain. But don't worry, because if the little devil died, there would be no more story. So soon after we see some soldiers guarding the border, and while camping they found the little devil, so they took him to the military infirmary. We realized that he lost a hand and his face was probably disfigured, which affected him quite a bit, since let's remember that he is a narcissist. And the funny thing here is that the father barely mentions his son Gordy, believing that he had also died, and Azulin barely reacts, as if to say something like, never mind the loss of Gordy, what's for lunch? Which leads us to believe that the father had a huge favoritism for Azulin, and that's why he gave him most of his cake in the beginning. At first I thought it was to watch Gordy's weight, but the Azulin in the short film tells us otherwise.
Ahora entiendo por qué padre siempre dice que no te quiere.
Yeah, poor little Gordy. Let's have an another F for him, guys. Anyway, once Azulin's father left, the higher-ups came in looking very concerned, cynical, saying that to make it up to him, they were going to make him a lieutenant, and Azulin obviously accepted, in addition to giving him a mask to cover his horrible face. For let us remember that the little bears tried too hard to be beautiful, something for which Gordy also admired Azulin.
Azulin was the overcoming of our species.
And by the way, the mask also refers to Sally Face or something like that. But well, time passed and Azulin was in charge of reviewing the progress of the new recruits, and something that caught my attention was that he treated the soldiers better than Sergeant Caricias.
Nice shooting, soldier.
On the other hand, Azulin told them that being the best did not always mean being the strongest or the most skilled. And on the other hand, we see that Gordy was still alive, and that he had adapted very well to life in the forest. But the most surprising thing is that he was taking care of Maria, the unicorn that Azulin had attacked. And the truth is that they don't seem as bad to me as the church made them out to be. Azulin, on the other hand, continued to use his influence to make the recruits see him as a hero, a role model, until one day it occurred to him that the best way to win the war was to burn the forest. Man, what geniuses. But the High Command obviously did not agree, because if the war ended, they would not be able to maintain their power and status. And while the soldiers and the people were eating garbage, they had all the luxuries right there.
How dare he?
Azulin convinced the recruits to kill the high commanders to lead the army to war, and the curious thing is that they only appointed Azulin lieutenant to exploit him.
You see, Captain, it is always good to create false heroes.
All to make the rookies believe that they could also survive if they tried hard enough, so they could use them as cannon fodder. So I think their death was not sad at all.
That's what you get for being a bitch!
They were all on their way to the big war, and they had started setting the place on fire. And we see how the poor animals also suffered the consequences. It's really scary. The unicorns realized what was happening, and in desperation they thought of asking the Apis for help. But their leader said that this would be useless because
they worship a god that is not good for nature.
Something that is not yet born, and that it will destroy the world, the human being. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This meant they had to fight the bears. Yes or yes. So they enlisted for the war, including Maria. And that's how they started leading with this war, letting us see how they pulled out the stuffing, just like the prophecy said. And even though the bears had the upper hand, let's remember that many were rookies, and taking them to war like that obviously was going to cause them problems. Yes, the dumbest death. Boy, I screwed up, didn't I? This allowed the unicorns to even the advantage, for they only had their horn to defend themselves. Almost all of them had been annihilated in the battle, but Azulin could not afford to lose, so he used his cannon to kill the unicorns. But then, Gordy showed up in the middle of his brother's mess, and enraged by what he had done, he threw fire at them to try to save them. Something that still didn't work. And by the way, what do you think would have happened if the bears had made other weapons? I think they would have won without so much disaster. But well, even though the nearby bears were already well and truly dead, Maria was the only survivor. And just as Gordy was trying to get closer, out of the shadows appeared the little blue devil. Gordy didn't recognize him, but then Azulin took off his mask.
Hermanito.
It's horrible!
He could see that he was really fucked up. Gordy, despite the horrible things his brother had done, hugged and comforted him, showing that Gordy is incapable of holding hatred or resentment. Azulin cries uncontrollably, saying that it was all his fault, although the truth is, I think he was trying to manipulate his brother again.
I'm a monster, always have been.
Tell me something I don't know, you fool.
But Gordy heard Maria's screams of pain, so without hesitation he ran to help her. Surprised, Azulin could not believe what he was seeing. How is it possible that his brother would abandon him just to support a dirty unicorn, the most hated and despised being of his species? Betrayal. Azulin is filled with rage and hatred, takes a rock and hits his brother to death, making reference to the betrayal of Cain and Abel, two characters of the Bible, since this character was very envious of him. It must be remembered that Azulin had a great fear of being alone, and it is for this reason that he defended his brother. He wanted Gordy to see him as the only person who could accept him, even though he was, according to him, an ugly, inept man. Or at least, that's how Azulin described him. Azulin saved Gordy because he was the only one who would stand by him, no matter how cruel he was. He didn't see Gordy as a brother, he saw him as a belonging, something he could use whenever he wanted. Yes, sociopaths can be very good at faking guilt, just like he did at his mother's grave, who he killed just because he wanted her attention for himself, and Gordy, in his dying breaths, asked him not to hurt Maria. Even when he was leaving with Jesus, he only cared about another living being. But Azulin, without any compassion, approached Mary and kissed her, just as Judas did with God before betraying him, and then he killed her in cold blood. The war is finally over, and the little scoundrel had made it.
We won! We won! Suck my balls! Mom, I'm somebody now!
Azulin drank the blood of the last unicorn, just as the prophecy said, but then he began to feel very sick. And then something weirder happened, as Maria's body began to mutate into a strange mass of flesh. This monster absorbed Gordy's body to join him, and then without Azulin noticing, ran after him to devour him. Azulin was terrified, but to be honest, the little devil deserved it. After all, actions have consequences, don't they, Azulin? And out of this merger came the god that the unicorns feared so much, man.
Oh, how scary, I'm leaving!
Referring to Dan, who will now rule and destroy the world, leading the apes to their evolution. But now let's see more in context what the heck all this meant, because we don't know which one the creators smoked. How is it possible that from cuddly bears plus unicorns equals a human? And to answer this, let's understand that everything is representative. We are given to understand that the unicorns themselves represent nature, while Gordy represents kindness and love, highlighting his ability to have empathy for others, while the sociopath Azulin represents evil, vanity, and envy. And by uniting all this, he gave birth to the first being of a new species, a being with the capacity to do both good and evil, but with enough intelligence to choose and decide what to do with it. I also believe that the bears themselves represent religion and its sins, like envy, gluttony, lustful breast, let's say lust. And the apes, on the other hand, represent humanity in its primitive state, while the unicorns represent the angels, pure and good beings, whose only purpose is to protect and restore life in paradise. So when they die, the only thing that remains is that great monster of flesh, a being that represents life in its wildest state, a being who only cares about eating and surviving, but who in the end became what the prophecy said, only that instead of a beautiful bear, he became a human.
I do not understand anything.
And in fact, we see how the apes that are close to him try to imitate him, making reference to the line of evolution. However, this has left us with more questions than answers, because how did the apes know who they were praying to in the temple? And if this was already there before the bears and unicorns existed, who the heck built the church? And this made me raise some theories. And well, I think all this is based on a story after the final judgment, which means that humans had already existed before the bears and unicorns. But God for some reason forgot to erase some details, like the ruined church, and the last humans wrote those prophecies. Later, the bears developed more intelligence, and one day they found the prophecies of the humans, and little by little they deduced them and adapted them for their own species. The bears, feeling superior, began to destroy the forest and exploit its resources for their own benefit, and the unicorns, who considered themselves the protectors, tried to stop them, but the bears, full of greed, refused, thus initiating the first sacred war, until finally the bears were banished from paradise. However, the unicorns did not kill them all, because they believed that they would change their minds, which only filled them with more hatred.
Como odio a esos unicornios.
But how is it possible that the bears wanted to exploit the forest for themselves, just because they thought they were superior, justifying it with God's will, just because they think they're superior, justifying it on the grounds that God wanted it that way? What kind of horrible being would do something like that?
Hey, that's an insult to me.
The other theory is that God, seeing the destruction of man and their threat by technology to themselves, decided to separate them by creating two new species, the bears and the unicorns. But these, due to destiny, came together again, only now, without the presence of this God. What theories do you have about it? Leave them in the comments and I'll be happy to make a video. But well, after all this, we ask ourselves the question, who are the bad guys then? The bears or the unicorns? And well, I think neither, because it was all a set of actions and consequences. The film explains that war has always been accompanied by the church, and that many times it has been used to brainwash the people or simply deceive them, to the point of sending soldiers to war only to die for their own benefit. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying that religions are bad. In fact, their objective is good, such as alleviating people's pain and guilt, or responding to the unknown such as death. But this directed in the wrong hands can be used to benefit only a few, sacrificing many in the name of a god. And indeed, this is what happens in the movie. The little bears go to war believing that this is the right thing to do since they were born, and that dying in the name of God is a great privilege, even though the prophecy was not even what they truly believed.
You have to have faith!
The movie is also a reminder of the horrors of war, showing us that violence only creates death and hatred. I would have liked to see more details of the movie, since we are not shown how Gordy and Maria met and accepted him, and I would have liked to know more about the rest of the bears.